I'm excited to close out this evening with our amazing picture book coach, Amy Nielander. She is the author of Grandma's Hug and the Ladybug Race, and is a wonderful illustrator, which you are about to see. So Amy, take us home.
Thank you so much. You're so sweet. And thank you for making this book fair possible and bringing us all together. So I hope everybody has been enjoying their day today and listening to all these wonderful author talks and asking questions and getting a peek behind their process. And I hope you walk away inspired, or maybe even you're checking off your holiday list. So I am going to finish with my picture book called Grandma's Hug. It is published by Page Street Kids. I wrote and illustrated it, and it's for children for ages 4 to 8 years old. So this story is about treasuring the smallest moments with the people you love. It is focused on the relationship between a devoted grandma and her space-loving granddaughter named May. So they always part ways with a hug until that moment almost slips away one day. If your child has a grandparent that is a big part of their life, or if you have a child who loves STEM activities and space or is creative, then this would be a great book to read together. So I'm going to share a presentation for you all. And okay, here we go. And then I want to do a check to see if you guys can all see this cover okay. Are we good? Yes?
We're good.
Okay. All right. So what I'm sharing with you today is actually a modified version of my school visit presentation called How Do You Create a Picture Book? So if we have any educators out there, you'll get a glimpse of how I walk through my picture book making journey with kids. So first we'll take a step back and just talk about why picture books are important. So picture books are important because they strengthen visual thinking skills, and we may have discussed this earlier before, so we'll just kind of go ahead and do a check back on it, but they strengthen visual thinking skills. So this is an illustration that is a wordless spread. And this is a great opportunity to ask kids questions about what they think is going on in the story. So a child may point out things that you don't even notice, which is the best part. And I think kids really have a fun time becoming a part of that reading experience. And so looking at a wordless illustration is a great way to increase those visual thinking skills. So for example, a question you could ask a child when they see this spread would be, what do you think is going on in this picture? Another important thing about picture books is readers learn new words and concepts. So this is a scene from the story when May is working hard on a space fair project, and we see she's making a space pet, and it's not quite coming together. So you can see that right up here, lots of rolled up paper. She's frustrated. And so this could lead to a discussion about how robots are made. This moment might pique a child's curiosity and make them wonder, well, how do robots come together? And what parts are needed to make a robot? And that research could introduce words like sensors and accelerometers into their vocabulary. So just by looking at that scene in a picture book, it could birth all kinds of interest. And lastly, picture books help us experience emotions. So this is one of the last scenes in Grandma's Hug. Prior to this moment, the reader has watched May grow up and how her relationship with her grandma has strengthened over time. So we learned that they have a goodbye tradition. They always hug every time they say goodbye. So the page before this one shows May as the first 10-year-old astronaut. She is boarding a space shuttle, but realizes when she's inside that she forgot to hug Grandma goodbye. So the countdown begins and she yells out on this page, "I am not leaving without a hug," at the very last moment. So I'm not going to spoil what happens. This is a cliffhanger for you all, but it is a happy ending. So, but this moment is an opportunity for a child to communicate what feeling is being expressed here. She's charged with emotions. So a teacher or a parent could say, what is she feeling? You know, how would you feel if you were in this situation? So picture books invite kids to communicate and express their own emotions. All right, so we are going to move along into how do you create a picture book. So when I visit schools, I bring my story steps with me. And this was the day before school shut down in March. So I was lucky enough to get my presentation in on Grandma's Hug because it had just released the month beforehand. So there are a group of boxes that represent the story making process. And you can see that on your left-hand side on the table. And it's a simple and engaging way for kids to understand how a story is constructed. So each step represents a part of the process. It starts with inspiration, which is this tiny box, and then it moves to book, which is this last box. So I use the analogy of stairs because everyone understands how they work and what might happen if you don't use them properly. So I'll ask kids, what do you think would happen if you went from the very first step and you skipped all these stairs to this last step, you know, and they all respond the same way. You would get hurt, you might fall. So the same thing applies to a story. You can't skip parts because your story will suffer. So it's really important to go through this process. And throughout my presentation, I have kids help me open these boxes up. They love the element of surprise, and it makes the visit very interactive. So it's really a fun tool for me to take with me to schools. So we're going to talk about inspiration. Inspiration leads to ideas, and we all, as authors and writers, have to start from somewhere, right? We need something to really make that idea bloom. So for me, the idea for the story popped in my mind in 2013 when I was walking my daughter up to the school entrance one day. The bell rang and kids ran in, and then I heard a nearby parent yell out, "I am not leaving without a hug." And that sentence stuck in my head immediately. I kept wondering, what would you do if you didn't get that hug? And in the process of tossing ideas around, a childhood memory was rattled, and it led me to write the first draft of my story. And that's what it looked like right here. So as a children's book writer, it's important to mock your story up. Even if you're not illustrating, you really need to familiarize yourself with page turns because those are building moments up. You know, you're building tension in your story and you want your reader to keep turning that page. And so this is that little itty bitty first book. So that one that I could fit in my hands. So every story needs a problem. So the problem for my story was leaving a loved one without saying goodbye. So I talked to kids about, what if you didn't say goodbye? You know, how do you say goodbye? And we talk about different ways of doing that. Do you hug your family member? Do you blow them a kiss? Do you just wave to them? And so one thing is agreed on, a goodbye is always happening, no matter what, how you express it, you always make time for that goodbye. And then I ask, how would you feel if you didn't say goodbye? And for my family, I know when I see my family, we hug hello and we hug goodbye. And if I didn't go through those motions, I think I would feel detached. I think I would feel unsafe in a way, disconnected and a little sad. And it reminded me of walking around with shoelaces that were untied. You know, you didn't get to them and you know you could maybe trip on them, right? And so you close them up, you zip up that moment by tying them up and you feel safe. So would you leave? You know, would you ever leave without saying goodbye? And a lot of the responses are no, you would not leave. So the next step is characters. If you love your characters, so will your reader. So after you have inspiration and you have a problem, it's time to develop those characters. And to make characters your reader is going to love, I like to infuse my characters with people, with pieces of people that I care for. Oops. So Grandma's personality traits were inspired by my mom's creativity. So Grandma in the story, she's very creative. And my mom was exploding with creativity when I was growing up. So in this moment in the story, May is gone at camp and Grandma is very lonely and she has to work through that loneliness. And it leads her to creating this bird mural on her wall because they love bird watching together. And so that's something that she's holding on to comfort her through this time away from May. And so you can see on the left-hand side, this is actually a wall in our home that I grew up in, and it's painted on by my mom. And so that was a story, a part of the story that is kind of infused with her. Another physical trait was inspired by my grandma, who actually lived in Romania. So she would visit us a handful of times, and she always wore this house coat. So there was a giant language barrier between us. I didn't know how to speak Romanian and she did not know how to speak English. And so we could never have a conversation. You know, she would stay with us for months, but we never communicated. I mean, we communicated maybe through body language and expressions, but not verbally. And so I kind of was more sensitive to the things that she did and what she was wearing. And I wanted to kind of pay homage to her in my story because I could never talk to her. And so her house coat is what inspired Grandma's house coat right here on the right-hand side. So you can see that. And then the physical traits, so the story shows a passage of time. It begins when May is 3 years old and it ends when she's 10 years old. And because I had to age them in my illustrations, I studied that in these pictures with my mother-in-law and my daughter. And so luckily they were always standing on the right side of her and I could gauge where my daughter's head was, you know, as she aged. And it was really helpful reference for me because I needed to make my world believable. And this was the way, you know, I was trying to make sure people could feel that. So step 4 is about research and revising. So you have to strengthen your story with research and revisions. So I did a lot of researching the past and the future. So I'm a former product designer, and one of my favorite parts of designing was the concept phase. That was the funnest. Just imagining the next version of what a product could be was just exciting to me. But even though concept designs had the potential to improve our life, they were often written off early because they were maybe too costly or the technology just wasn't quite there yet. So since Grandma's Hug is a story about a 10-year-old girl going to space, it takes place in a fictional world. And this type of event has never happened before. So I had to create a world that felt different, but was still familiar. So I decided to design a world where previous concepts in history did not fail and show how that may have accelerated the timeline for me in this world. So it was almost 1977 jumping to 2045. So this Jeep in the corner was a 1970s electric mail carrier built by the American Motor Corporation. It was so advanced in its technology, it attracted the attention of NASA, and they eventually conducted research on it in 1977. But the truck was eventually discontinued in 1983 because of the cost. So I had never heard about this until I did research, and I find it fascinating that electric vehicles were around back in the 70s, and I'm not sure, how many people are aware of that, or kids especially. So down here below, this is a picture of a concept called the Venture Star, and that was created in the 1990s by Lockheed Martin. It was a reusable space plane meant to replace the space shuttle, which we're all familiar with. The design didn't rely on rocket boosters, and it would, it would reduce materials along with other benefits. But after the test vehicle failed, that program was canceled in 2001. So both of these vehicles did not reach success in real life, but in Grandma's Hug, they did. So I could celebrate all of the work that went on behind the scenes and kind of take a look at, well, what if they worked? What if they didn't fail? This is the world that they could live in. Oops. All right, and so studying poses was also another part of my research. And this is looking more at the illustration side of things. As a writer for children's books, you can always add illustration notes in your picture book manuscripts if you have a clear idea for what you want to happen. So for me, I might envision a scene in my head, and because I need to make that scene believable, I use my pictures as reference, and my daughter was a tremendous help throughout the process. So this is a picture of me I mocked up in our workout room because I needed to get the hands right, and this is what it turned out to be. So it's kind of, you can see, how it grew and where it started. So this is another scene of me trying to figure out how Grandma's legs were gonna work. And then this is the scene where, she's with May involved in an activity. And then this is one of my favorite ones. It didn't make the book, but throughout the process, I had to come up with cover designs. The one on the right is just a cropped image of one of the possible covers, and it was taking a look at them, looking at the stars. And so this is my daughter and I at the top of our stairs. So the last step is you must keep trying and trying and trying to turn a story into a book. Oh, where did my other, okay, there we go. So final text and artwork was completed in 11 months, and it started in October, and I finished in August. There was a point between March and August where it was kind of waiting time. They were sharing the story with the sales team. The sales team was going out to different, test customers, and then we would get feedback, and then it would come back to me, and I would make the appropriate changes. And do you remember about the parent that I said shouted out that sentence in the story? Well, at the time, we were not friends. She had a daughter who was in my daughter's grade, and we hovered in similar circles. And since then, became very good friends. And I think she may be here. I don't know, Kathy. I don't know if she's here. But this is her at my book launch. And I knew that if the story was going to get published, I was dedicating it to her. It was almost an incentive for me. And she didn't know about it until she had a copy in her hand. She got the first copy. So the story didn't end up being called "I Am Not Leaving Without a Hug," but we were still able to use that sentence at the climax. So that was the peak of the story. And families can find activities linked to the book on my website if you want to. There's a bunch that extend the theme of the book. If your child likes to, if they spend a lot of time with their grandparents, they can draw a scene of their favorite activity. If your child likes to draw, they can imagine what they might do on the moon if they went there. If your child likes to design, they could come up with their own space pet and decide what type of features and functions it would have. So those are all on my website, and you can download them for free. And these are just a couple examples from that school I visited. They had them on the walls. It was really fun to see kids fill them up with fun pictures and bright colors. So there's this one, "Fly like a bird." If you could fly, where would you fly? And this was Paris with my family. And then this is a space pet called Gitter, and it runs and it hugs and it kisses and it plays. And one of its jobs in space would be to get a rock from the moon and bring it back to Earth. So it's just kind of fun. So thank you so much for being here today. And for all of you here, there's a 10% promotion code for anything in my shop and also virtual school visits. So if you know a teacher, you feel free to share that code. It's available until February 1st. And if you have any questions, you can always contact me. And these are my social media pages. My website is amynielander.com, and then I'm on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. So yeah, so if any of you have questions, I'd love to answer.
Thank you so much, Amy, for your beautiful presentation as always. I'm always jealous of your design skills.
Thank you.
All right, Kristen has a question. Go for it.
Okay, first of all, your illustrations are just above and beyond. Like I'm finishing my children's book, and I'm working with a designer from Fiverr because that's what I feel like I can afford. You know what I mean? And it's not to say because I believe in paying people for their art, but for this first book, I'm just kind of going the cheap route. When you were talking, I looked you up on Amazon, and you have another book. And my question to you is, I saw that was translated to Spanish?
Italian.
Italian. Okay,
Yeah.
so when you're self-publishing and you're doing that, is it just kind of the same protocol where you just upload it in a different language, or how did you go about getting the translation? Do you speak Italian? Were you able to translate it yourself?
I wish I could speak Italian. No, so this was through my publisher. So this is a traditionally published book. Okay. And after I sold The Ladybug Race, it was a wordless book too, to Pomegranate, we were approached by an Italian publisher, and they asked if they could purchase rights. And so we sold those rights. But that was all after the deal was kind of sealed. So once you have once you have a book with a publisher, it's their department. They will be the ones who make that happen, that translation. As far as self-publishing goes, I don't know. I'm not familiar with how you might go ahead and do that. But I would think even at book shows or trade shows, you might learn more there. You might come across international, people who are looking for international copyright permission for your book.
I didn't see your publisher on your profile. Who is your publisher? Pomegranate?
Pomegranate was for The Ladybug Race, and for this one, it's Page Street Kids.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, and you know what? If you want to send me your email, and I can, if I come across anything that might be valuable for you, then I can pass it along.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, I'll write it down, and then if I come across anything, I'll let you know.
What city are you in?
I'm in Royal Oak.
Oh, you're in Royal Oak. Okay.
Yeah. Where are you? Are you in
I'm from, I just moved from Ferndale to the Ozarks. My husband and I just bought property in northern Arkansas, but yeah, no, this is great. Thanks.
You are welcome.
Yeah,
okay, put it in there.
Amy is a coach, so if anyone does want to sign up with her, she can help you with manuscripts or query letters. She's excellent at giving feedback. So I put the link in the chat box, detroitwritingroom.com/coaches. All our coaching sessions are virtual right now. Hopefully we'll get back to being here one day soon, but it's all on Zoom.